In the unforgiving sands of Afghanistan, where respect is earned through blood, sweat, and steel, Staff Sergeant Maya Chen stood at the edge of what would become the most defining moment of her military career. The scorching sun beat down mercilessly as she faced Commander Jake "Razor" Harrison, a man whose reputation preceded him like a storm front. 23 years of service, 4 tours in the Middle East, and a chest full of medals that told stories of heroism most people couldn't even imagine. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment imaginable, infiltrating a heavily fortified Taliban compound that intelligence reports suggested housed a high-value target responsible for coordinating attacks against coalition forces. The compound, nestled in the rocky terrain of the Hindu Kush mountains, had already claimed the lives of 3 reconnaissance teams. It was a death trap, a fortress of stone and steel that seemed impenetrable to conventional assault methods. Commander Harrison looked at Maya with the kind of skepticism that had been honed by decades of warfare. She was different from the typical Navy SEAL, smaller in stature, quieter in demeanor, but there was something in her eyes that spoke of an inner fire that burned brighter than most. At 28 years old, Maya had already distinguished herself in explosive ordnance disposal, earning commendations for her work defusing IEDs that had stumped more experienced technicians. But this mission was different. This wasn't about careful, methodical bomb disposal. This was about using explosives as tools of infiltration, about thinking like the enemy while staying one step ahead of death itself. The briefing room fell silent as Harrison spread the reconnaissance photos across the metal table. The compound was a maze of interconnected buildings, surrounded by 12-foot concrete walls topped with razor wire. Guard towers stood at each corner, manned by insurgents armed with RPGs and heavy machine guns. Motion sensors, thermal imaging cameras, and tripwires created a web of surveillance that had detected every previous infiltration attempt within minutes of entry. "This is a suicide mission," Harrison said, his voice carrying the weight of too many fallen soldiers. "The walls are too high for conventional scaling, the gates are reinforced steel, and our intelligence suggests they have underground tunnels that we haven't mapped yet. Every approach we've modeled ends the same way, with body bags coming home." Maya studied the photographs with the intensity of a chess master analyzing her next move. While Harrison and the other officers focused on the obvious entry points, she was seeing something else entirely. Her background in explosive ordnance disposal had taught her to think in 3 dimensions, to understand how structures responded to different types of stress and pressure. More importantly, it had taught her that sometimes the most effective solution wasn't the most obvious one. "Sir, what if we're thinking about this all wrong?" Maya's voice cut through the pessimistic atmosphere like a blade. "Everyone who's tried to breach this compound has focused on going over or through the obvious entry points. But what if the weakness isn't where they expect us to look?" Harrison raised an eyebrow, his scarred face showing a mixture of interest and skepticism. Maya had earned her place on the team through exceptional performance in training exercises, but this wasn't a training exercise. This was life and death on a scale that could affect regional stability and the safety of thousands of coalition forces. "Explain your thinking, Sergeant," Harrison commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had made life and death decisions in the heat of combat more times than he cared to remember. The room fell silent, all eyes focused on Maya as she prepared to outline a plan that would either revolutionize their approach to this seemingly impossible mission or confirm Harrison's suspicions that she was in over her head. Maya took a deep breath, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether she would be given the chance to prove herself or whether she would be relegated to support duties while someone else led the mission. She had spent countless hours studying the intelligence reports, analyzing satellite imagery, and running simulations in her head. Now it was time to translate her vision into a plan that could save lives and complete the mission. "The key to this infiltration isn't brute force," Maya began, her voice steady despite the weight of scrutiny from the room full of hardened warriors.
It's misdirection and precision timing. We've been thinking about this compound like a fortress that needs to be stormed, but what if we think about it like a complex explosive device that needs to be carefully disarmed from the inside out? She moved to the whiteboard and began sketching a rough diagram of the compound, her movements quick and confident. Intelligence reports indicate that the insurgents have established a routine patrol schedule. Every 47 minutes, the guards rotate positions, creating a window of approximately 90 seconds where the eastern wall has reduced surveillance coverage. It's not much, but it's enough if we time everything perfectly. Commander Harrison leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued despite his reservations. And how exactly do you plan to exploit a 90-second window when you still need to breach a 12-foot reinforced concrete wall? Maya's eyes lit up with the kind of intensity that came from hours of meticulous planning. C4-shaped charges, but not in the way anyone would expect. Instead of trying to blow a hole straight through the wall, I'm going to create a controlled collapse in a specific section. The eastern wall has a structural weakness where the newer concrete meets the original foundation. If I place the charges correctly, I can cause that section to fold inward rather than exploding outward. Sergeant Rodriguez scratched his beard thoughtfully. That's actually pretty clever. But how do you plan to get close enough to place the charges without being spotted? And more importantly, how do you plan to survive the blast? Maya turned back to the diagram, her marker moving with surgical precision as she added details to her plan. Phase 1 involves creating a diversion on the opposite side of the compound. Small explosions, nothing that would cause significant structural damage, but enough to draw the attention of the guards and make them think the main assault is coming from the west. She paused, letting the implications sink in before continuing. While their attention is focused on the false threat, I approach the eastern wall during the patrol rotation window. The shaped charges are designed to create a controlled implosion. The wall section will collapse inward, creating a breach point that's large enough for entry, but small enough to avoid bringing down the entire structure. Lieutenant Sarah Morrison, the team's intelligence specialist, raised her hand. What about the noise factor? Even a controlled explosion is going to alert everyone in the compound to your presence. That's where the timing becomes critical, Maya responded, her confidence never wavering. The diversion explosions on the western side will mask the sound of the wall breach. To the insurgents, it will sound like part of the same coordinated assault they think they're already dealing with. By the time they realize what's actually happening, I'll already be inside the compound. Commander Harrison stood up and walked to the map, studying the layout with the calculating gaze of someone who had seen too many operations go wrong because of overlooked details. You're talking about infiltrating a compound that has defeated every previous attempt, locating a high-value target in a building you've never been inside, and extracting valuable intelligence, all while maintaining enough operational security to escape alive. You're wanting to do this solo, with nothing but C4 and your instincts to guide you? Maya met his gaze steadily. Sir, with respect, every previous attempt failed because they tried to use conventional assault tactics against an unconventional target. Sometimes the most effective solution is the one nobody expects. My EOD training has taught me that every structure has a weakness. You just need to know how to find it and exploit it. The tension in the room was palpable as Commander Harrison weighed his options. Approving Maya's plan meant taking a significant risk with one of his most promising soldiers. Rejecting it meant potentially missing an opportunity to complete a mission that had strategic importance beyond the immediate tactical objectives.
The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity before Commander Harrison finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of command decisions that had shaped his entire career. Sergeant Chen, your plan shows tactical innovation and a deep understanding of explosive ordnance applications. However, innovation without proven effectiveness is just another word for gambling with lives. Maya felt her heart sink, but she maintained her composure, understanding that military hierarchy demanded respect even in the face of disagreement. She had known that her unconventional approach might not align with traditional SEAL tactics, but she had hoped that the strategic importance of the mission might outweigh conservative operational thinking. Sir, I understand your concerns, Maya replied,
her voice steady despite her disappointment. But with respect, the conventional approaches have already proven ineffective. We've lost 3 reconnaissance teams trying to breach this compound using standard infiltration techniques. If we continue using the same methods, we're going to continue getting the same results. Harrison turned to face the map again, his scarred hands tracing the compound's perimeter as he considered the strategic implications. The intelligence they needed from this target was critical. Satellite communications had intercepted fragments of conversations suggesting a coordinated attack on coalition supply lines was being planned. The information contained within that compound could potentially save hundreds of lives, but only if they could successfully extract it. The problem, Sergeant, is that your plan relies heavily on variables we can't control, Harrison continued, his voice taking on the tone of an instructor explaining a complex tactical concept. Weather conditions, enemy patrol adherence to routine, the structural integrity assumptions about the wall construction. Any one of these factors going wrong could turn your infiltration into a death trap. Sergeant Rodriguez shifted in his seat, clearly torn between supporting his colleague and acknowledging the legitimate concerns raised by their commander. Sir, if I may, Chen's explosive calculations are sound. I've reviewed her work, and the shaped charge specifications would indeed create the type of controlled breach she's describing. The question isn't whether the plan could work, it's whether the risk is justified. Lieutenant Morrison pulled up additional intelligence reports on her tablet, her brow furrowed with concentration. Commander, we've just received updated satellite imagery from intelligence. The compound's security patterns have remained consistent for the past 2 weeks. Chen's timing calculations appear to be accurate based on the observed patrol rotations. Maya seized the opportunity presented by this new information. Sir, the consistency in their security patterns actually works in our favor. Routine breeds complacency, and complacency creates exploitable vulnerabilities. If they've been following the same patrol schedule for 2 weeks, it suggests they're confident in their security measures and are not anticipating a sophisticated infiltration attempt. Harrison's expression remained impassive, but Maya could see the gears turning behind his weathered features. He was a commander who had built his reputation on calculated risks and strategic thinking, not reckless bravado or desperate gambles. Every decision he made had to balance mission objectives against the lives of his soldiers, and that balance was never easy to strike. Even if we accept that your infiltration plan has merit, Harrison said slowly, there's still the question of extraction. Getting into the compound is only half the battle. You still need to get out alive with the intelligence we need. How do you plan to accomplish that while the entire facility is on high alert? Maya had anticipated this question and had spent considerable time developing contingency plans for various extraction scenarios. The same principles that apply to infiltration can be adapted for extraction, sir. Once I've secured the intelligence, I create another diversion, this time from inside the compound. Small explosive charges placed at strategic points will create confusion and draw attention away from my actual extraction route. She moved to the map and pointed to a drainage system that appeared in the reconnaissance photos. These drainage tunnels weren't built for security, they were built for functionality. Intelligence reports don't indicate any sensor coverage in the tunnel system, which means it's a potential extraction route that hasn't been considered by their security planners. The room fell into another contemplative silence as everyone processed the layers of complexity involved in Maya's proposed operation. It was clear that she had thought through many of the potential complications, but military operations had a tendency to develop complications that no amount of planning could anticipate. Captain Williams, the team's senior officer, who had remained silent throughout most of the discussion, finally spoke up. Commander, we have 48 hours before intelligence suggests the target may relocate to a different facility. If we're going to act on this mission, we need to make a decision soon. Harrison nodded, understanding the time pressure they were operating under. Intelligence operations rarely provided the luxury of extended planning periods, and opportunity windows often closed as quickly as they opened. The strategic value of the mission was undeniable, but so was the risk to one of his most promising soldiers. "Sergeant Chen," Harrison said finally, his voice carrying a tone that suggested he had reached a decision. "Your plan demonstrates tactical creativity and technical competence. However, I cannot in good conscience approve a solo infiltration mission for a target of this significance." Maya's heart sank again, but Harrison wasn't finished speaking. "Instead, I'm modifying your plan. You'll lead the infiltration using your proposed breach technique, but you won't go in alone. Rodriguez will provide explosive support, and Morrison will handle intelligence extraction and communications. It's still a high-risk operation, but at least you'll have backup if things go wrong."
The relief and excitement on Maya's face was unmistakable, but it was tempered by the understanding that she now carried responsibility, not just for her own life, but for the lives of her teammates as well. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of intensive preparation that would determine the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Maya found herself at the center of a whirlwind of activity as the modified plan took shape, with every detail scrutinized, tested, and refined until it reached the level of precision that military operations demanded. In the armory, Maya worked alongside Sergeant Rodriguez to prepare the specialized explosive charges that would be crucial to her infiltration strategy. The C4 needed to be shaped and positioned with mathematical precision. Too little explosive force and the wall wouldn't breach properly. Too much, and the resulting explosion would alert the entire compound to their presence before they could achieve their objectives. The key is understanding the concrete's compression strength relative to the rebar reinforcement patterns, Maya explained to Rodriguez as she carefully measured out the plastic explosive. Standard breaching charges are designed for maximum destruction, but we need controlled destruction. We want to create a weakness that cascades through the structure in a predictable way. Rodriguez nodded, his experienced hands working alongside Maya's as they crafted the specialized charges. "I've been doing this for 12 years, and I've never seen anyone approach explosives with this level of technical precision. Most of us learn through experience and intuition, but you're treating it like a science experiment." "Because it is a science experiment," Maya replied, her focus never wavering from the delicate work. "Every explosive reaction follows predictable physical laws. If you understand the science, you can control the outcome. If you're just relying on experience and intuition, you're essentially gambling with physics." Lieutenant Morrison approached their workstation, carrying a tablet loaded with the latest intelligence updates. "We've got new information from signals intelligence. The target has been conducting encrypted communications every evening at 2100 hours. That gives us a specific window when we know exactly where he'll be located within the compound." Maya looked up from her work, immediately recognizing the tactical significance of this information. "That's perfect timing for our infiltration schedule. If we initiate the diversion at 2055 hours and execute the wall breach at 2058 hours, I'll be inside the compound just as he begins his communication session. He'll be stationary and focused on his calls, which means less chance of unexpected movement." The three of them spread out the updated floor plans of the main building, cross-referencing the architectural drawings with thermal imaging data that showed patterns of human activity during evening hours. Maya's EOD training had taught her to read structures like books, understanding how rooms connected, where utilities ran, and which areas were most likely to contain high-value assets. The communications equipment will require electrical power and probably some kind of external antenna system, Maya noted, pointing to a room on the second floor that showed consistent thermal signatures. This room has the best positioning for external communications, and the power consumption patterns match what we'd expect from sophisticated radio equipment. Rodriguez examined the structural drawings with the eye of someone who had spent years thinking about how buildings could be destroyed. If you need to create an emergency exit, this support wall here could be compromised with a small charge. It's not load-bearing for the entire structure, but it would open up a direct route to the stairwell.
The level of detailed planning required for this type of operation was staggering. Every possible contingency needed to be considered, every backup plan needed its own backup plan, and every team member needed to understand not only their own role, but the roles of their teammates. Military operations succeeded or failed based on the ability of individual soldiers to adapt when the original plan encountered the inevitable complications that combat situations always provided. Commander Harrison appeared in the armory doorway, his presence immediately commanding attention from the three soldiers. "How are we progressing with the preparations?" Maya stood and faced her commanding officer, her posture reflecting both respect and confidence. "Sir, the explosive charges are prepared and tested. We've run simulations using similar concrete compositions, and the breaching characteristics are consistent with our calculations. Rodriguez has confirmed the structural analysis, and Morrison has identified the optimal timing window based on the target's communication schedule." Harrison examined the charges and the detailed planning documents spread out across the workstation. "And contingency plans? What happens if the initial breach doesn't create the opening you need? What happens if the target isn't where intelligence suggests he'll be located?" Maya had anticipated these questions and had spent considerable time developing alternative approaches. If the primary breach fails, we have secondary charges that can create an alternate entry point through the drainage system Morrison identified. If the target has moved to a different location within the compound, we have floor plans and thermal imaging data for all the buildings so we can adapt our search pattern accordingly. Rodriguez added his own perspective to the contingency planning. "Sir, we've also prepared additional explosive charges that can be used for emergency extraction if the original plan gets compromised. The beauty of Chen's approach is that the same techniques she's using for infiltration can be adapted for escape if necessary." Harrison nodded approvingly, clearly impressed by the thoroughness of their preparation. "And communication protocols? How will you maintain contact with the command post during the operation?" Morrison stepped forward, her tablet displaying the communication equipment they would be using. "Low-frequency radio with encrypted burst transmission capability. We'll check in every 15 minutes with status updates, and we have emergency beacons if we need immediate extraction support." The weight of responsibility was evident in Harrison's expression as he considered the final details of the operation. This wasn't just another training exercise or routine patrol. This was a high-stakes mission that could affect regional stability and the safety of coalition forces throughout the theater of operations.
As evening approached, Maya found herself in the quiet solitude of the equipment preparation area, methodically checking and rechecking every piece of gear that would accompany her into what could very well be the most dangerous night of her life. The weight of the mission pressed down on her shoulders like a physical presence, but rather than feeling overwhelmed, she felt a strange sense of clarity and purpose that she had rarely experienced before. Her gear loadout was carefully optimized for stealth and flexibility, rather than heavy firepower. The explosive charges were secured in specialized pouches that would protect them from impact while allowing for quick access. Her sidearm was a suppressed pistol loaded with subsonic ammunition, chosen specifically to minimize noise signature if she encountered unexpected resistance. Night vision goggles, communication equipment, and a variety of technical tools completed her equipment selection. Rodriguez appeared beside her, his own gear similarly organized and ready. "You know, Chen, I've been on a lot of missions over the years, but I've never seen anyone prepare with this level of methodical precision. Most of us just grab our gear and trust our training to get us through." Maya looked up from her equipment check, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "My father was a mechanical engineer who worked on bridge construction projects. He always told me that the difference between success and failure usually comes down to the quality of the preparation. Measure twice, cut once, he used to say. I guess I've applied that philosophy to military operations." Lieutenant Morrison joined them, her communication equipment already configured and tested. The latest intelligence update confirms that the target's routine hasn't changed. We should have our optimal window starting at 20:55 hours. Weather conditions are favorable, clear skies, minimal wind, and no precipitation expected. The three of them represented a carefully chosen team, each bringing specialized skills that would be crucial to mission success.
Maya's explosive expertise and structural analysis capabilities, Rodriguez's experience with complex demolition operations, and Morrison's intelligence gathering and communication skills created a combination that Commander Harrison believed gave them the best possible chance of success. As they made their final preparations, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. Growing up in a family that valued precision and technical excellence, she had always been drawn to challenges that required both intellectual analysis and practical application. The military had provided an outlet for these interests, but it had also presented her with obstacles that went beyond technical challenges. Being a woman in a male-dominated field required her to constantly prove herself in ways that her male colleagues never had to consider. Every mistake was scrutinized more closely. Every success had to be repeated multiple times before it was truly accepted. And every opportunity had to be earned through performance that exceeded the standards applied to others. Rather than becoming bitter about these realities, Maya had chosen to use them as motivation to excel beyond any reasonable expectations. "Chen," Rodriguez said quietly, his voice carrying a tone of respect that had developed over their months of working together. "I want you to know that regardless of how tonight goes, you've already proven yourself to everyone on this team. Harrison might not say it directly, but he's impressed by your tactical thinking and your technical skills. We all are." Maya felt a surge of gratitude toward Rodriguez, understanding that his words carried weight coming from someone with his experience and reputation. Military units operated on trust and mutual respect, and earning the acceptance of seasoned warriors like Rodriguez was perhaps more important than any official commendation or promotion. "Thank you, Rodriguez. That means more to me than you probably realize. But let's make sure we all come back from this mission with our objective accomplished and everyone accounted for." Morrison checked her watch and looked toward the briefing room where Commander Harrison was conducting final coordination with the support elements. "We should head to the helicopter pad. Transport leaves in 15 minutes, and Harrison wants to conduct one final mission briefing during the flight to the insertion point." As they gathered their gear and prepared to leave the preparation area, Maya felt the familiar mixture of anticipation and focused calm that preceded high-stakes operations. The months of training, the hours of planning, and the detailed preparation were about to be tested in the unforgiving reality of combat operations. The helicopter pad was illuminated by red lights that preserved night vision, while providing enough illumination for safe equipment loading. The UH-860 Black Hawk that would transport them to the insertion point sat ready, its rotors already beginning to turn as the flight crew completed their pre-flight checks. Commander Harrison appeared at Maya's side as she approached the helicopter. "Sergeant Chen, I want you to understand that approving this modified version of your plan represents a significant deviation from standard operational procedures. The success or failure of this mission will reflect not only on your tactical abilities, but on the viability of the innovative approaches you've proposed." Maya met his gaze steadily, understanding the full implications of what he was saying. This mission would either establish her reputation as a tactical innovator or potentially end her military career if things went wrong. "Sir, I understand the stakes and I'm prepared to accept responsibility for the outcomes, but I'm also confident that this approach gives us the best possible chance of success." Harrison nodded, his expression reflecting both confidence in his soldiers and concern for their safety. "Then let's go prove that innovative thinking and precise execution can overcome seemingly impossible odds." As Maya climbed aboard the helicopter, she took one last look at the base that had been her home for the past year. In a few hours, she would either return as a soldier who had accomplished the impossible, or she might not return at all. The helicopter flight to the insertion point took 37 minutes through mountainous terrain that seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions under the cover of darkness. Maya sat in contemplative silence, her mind running through the mission timeline one final time, while the rhythmic beating of the rotor blades provided a mechanical soundtrack to her thoughts. The insertion point was located approximately 2 kilometers from the target compound, chosen specifically to minimize the chances of their arrival being detected by enemy surveillance systems. The team would have to cover the remaining distance on foot, moving through terrain that offered natural concealment, but also presented its own challenges in terms of navigation and timing. Rodriguez sat across from her, methodically checking his communication equipment and explosive devices. His years of experience in special operations were evident in the calm, professional manner with which he prepared for what lay ahead. Morrison was similarly focused, reviewing intelligence reports and updating their tactical map with any last-minute information that might affect their approach. Commander Harrison's voice came through their headsets as he conducted the final mission briefing over the helicopter's communication system. Intelligence confirms that compound security patterns remain consistent with our planning assumptions. Weather conditions are optimal, with clear skies and minimal atmospheric interference for our communication equipment. Maya listened intently while continuing to visualize the sequence of events that would unfold once they reached their objective. The success of the mission depended not only on the technical execution of her explosive charges, but on the precise timing and coordination of all team members. Every element had to work together seamlessly, like the components of a complex mechanical device. Remember that this is a high-value target with strategic significance beyond our immediate tactical objectives, Harrison continued. The intelligence we're seeking could prevent coordinated attacks against coalition forces throughout the region, but that intelligence is worthless if we don't return alive to deliver it. The helicopter began its descent toward the insertion point, and Maya felt the familiar sensation of her stomach dropping as they lost altitude rapidly. The flight crew was executing a tactical insertion designed to minimize their exposure time in potentially hostile airspace. Every second the helicopter remained on the ground represented increased risk of detection and potential compromise of the entire mission. 2 minutes to insertion, the pilot's voice announced through their headsets. Maya and her teammates began final equipment checks, ensuring that everything was secured and ready for immediate action upon landing. The mountainous terrain below them was a maze of rocky outcroppings, sparse vegetation, and deep shadows that would provide both concealment and obstacles during their approach to the target. Maya had studied topographical maps of the area extensively, but seeing the actual terrain through her night vision goggles gave her a better appreciation for the challenges they would face. 30 seconds, the pilot announced. The helicopter flared dramatically as it approached the landing zone, its engines changing pitch as the flight crew executed a perfect combat insertion. Maya could see the insertion point clearly now, a small clearing surrounded by large rocks that would provide immediate cover once they disembarked. The moment the helicopter touched down, Maya and her teammates moved with practiced precision, exiting the aircraft and immediately taking defensive positions while the helicopter lifted off and disappeared into the darkness. The sudden silence after the departure of the aircraft was profound, broken only by the distant sounds of wind moving through the rocky terrain. Maya activated her night vision equipment and began the process of orienting herself to their position relative to the target compound. The GPS coordinates confirmed their location, but she also used visible landmarks to verify their position using traditional navigation techniques that didn't depend on electronic systems that could potentially be compromised. "Check," Morrison whispered into her radio, testing their communication link with the command post. The response came back clearly, confirming that their communication systems were functioning properly and that they maintained contact with their support elements. Rodriguez moved up beside her, his own night vision equipment scanning the terrain ahead of them. "The approach route looks clear from here. We should be able to maintain concealment using the natural rock formations for at least the first kilometer." Maya nodded, shouldering her equipment pack and preparing to begin the approach march that would take them to their objective. The weight of the explosive charges and technical equipment was significant, but her training had conditioned her to operate effectively under these conditions. "Let's move,"
Maya whispered, taking point as the team began their carefully planned approach toward the compound. Each step had to be deliberate and silent, as sound carried far in the thin mountain air, and any noise could potentially alert enemy sentries to their presence. The terrain was challenging, requiring them to navigate around large boulder fields and across areas of loose rock that could create noise if disturbed. Maya's background in explosive ordnance disposal had taught her to move with extreme care and precision, skills that proved invaluable during their stealthy approach. As they covered the distance toward their objective, Maya felt her heart rate increase with anticipation. Everything they had planned and prepared for was about to be put to the ultimate test. The compound ahead of them represented not only a tactical challenge, but a personal proving ground where her innovative approaches would either succeed brilliantly or fail catastrophically. The lights of the compound became visible in the distance, appearing as tiny pinpricks of illumination against the dark, mountainous backdrop. Maya checked her watch, confirming that they were maintaining their planned timeline. In approximately 40 minutes, she would be placing explosive charges against a wall that 3 previous teams had failed to breach, attempting to accomplish something that conventional military wisdom suggested was impossible. But Maya had never been particularly concerned with conventional wisdom. She had always believed that the most effective solutions were often the ones that nobody expected.
As Maya and her team approached the final observation point, the compound revealed itself in all its formidable complexity. Through her night vision equipment, she could see the guard towers positioned at each corner of the facility, their occupants maintaining steady surveillance patterns that had been consistent for the past 2 weeks, according to intelligence reports. The 12-foot concrete walls, topped with razor wire, created an imposing perimeter that had successfully deterred every previous infiltration attempt. Maya crouched behind a large boulder, approximately 400 meters from the compound's eastern wall, the section she had identified as structurally vulnerable due to its later construction date. From this distance, she could observe the guard rotation patterns firsthand, confirming that the intelligence reports had been accurate about the timing and duration of the surveillance gaps. "Visual confirmation on the target area," Maya whispered into her radio microphone. "Guard tower occupancy appears consistent with intelligence predictions. I can see the color variation in the concrete that indicates the structural weakness we identified." Rodriguez positioned himself with a clear line of sight to the western side of the compound, where he would initiate the diversionary explosions designed to draw attention away from Maya's actual breach point. His explosive charges were smaller, but strategically placed to create maximum visual and auditory impact without causing significant structural damage that might alert the defenders to the true nature of the attack. Lieutenant Morrison established her position at the communication relay point, where she could maintain contact with both the command post and the infiltration team while monitoring enemy radio frequencies for any indication that their presence had been detected. Her equipment included signal intelligence capabilities that would provide early warning if the compound's security forces began coordinating a response to their activities. "Command post, this is infiltration team," Morrison reported quietly. "We are in position and ready to initiate operation. All systems are operational and we have visual confirmation of target compound." The response from Commander Harrison came back immediately, his voice carrying the tension that always accompanied high-stakes operations. "Copy, infiltration team. You are cleared to proceed. Weather conditions remain favorable, and we have no indication of increased enemy activity in your area." Maya checked her watch one final time, noting that they had 17 minutes until the optimal breach window opened. The guard rotation schedule had held consistent throughout their observation period, confirming that the enemy's security procedures had become routine rather than adaptive. This predictability was exactly what Maya's plan depended upon. "Beginning final approach to breach point," Maya whispered to her teammates. "Rodriguez, initiate diversionary sequence in 14 minutes on my mark. Morrison, maintain communication silence unless emergency extraction is required." The final 400 meters to the compound wall would be the most dangerous part of the entire operation. Maya would have to cross open ground while remaining undetected by thermal imaging systems, motion sensors, and human observers. Her approach route had been carefully planned to take advantage of natural terrain features and the blind spots created by the guard tower positioning, but success would ultimately depend on precise timing and her ability to move with absolute silence. Maya began her approach, moving in a low crouch that minimized her profile while allowing her to maintain mobility across the rocky terrain. Each step was calculated and deliberate, with her eyes constantly scanning for potential obstacles or signs that her presence had been detected. The weight of her explosive charges seemed to increase with every meter she covered, but her training had conditioned her to operate effectively under these conditions. The compound's perimeter lighting created pools of illumination that had to be avoided, while the shadows between these lit areas provided concealment that Maya used to mask her movement. Her night vision equipment allowed her to navigate effectively in the darkness, but she also relied on her other senses to detect any changes in the environment that might indicate approaching danger. As she reached the halfway point in her approach, she could hear the low murmur of conversation from one of the guard towers, carried across the still night air in a language she didn't understand but whose tone suggested routine boredom rather than heightened alertness. The guards were following their established patterns, unaware that their predictability was being exploited by someone who had studied their habits extensively. Maya's heart rate remained steady despite the intensity of the situation. Her EOD training had taught her to maintain calm focus under extreme pressure, understanding that emotional responses could lead to mistakes that proved fatal in high-stakes situations. Every breath was controlled and measured, every movement economical and purposeful. With 200 meters remaining to the target wall, Maya activated her final equipment checks. The C4 charges were secure and ready for deployment, her timing devices were calibrated correctly, and her communication equipment remained functional. The success of the mission now depended on her ability to execute the breach technique she had developed, a method that had never been tested under actual combat conditions. The eastern wall loomed larger as Maya approached, and she could see the subtle differences in concrete color and texture that indicated the structural weakness she intended to exploit. The newer section of wall had been constructed using slightly different materials and techniques, creating the vulnerability that conventional assault teams had overlooked in their focus on more obvious entry points.
Maya reached the base of the eastern wall with 3 minutes remaining before the optimal breach window opened. She pressed herself against the concrete surface, feeling the rough texture of the material that would soon become her gateway into the compound. The wall rose 12 feet above her, topped with razor wire that gleamed dully in the ambient light from the guard towers. Working with practiced efficiency, Maya began placing her shaped charges at precisely calculated points along the wall's base. Each explosive device had been designed to create a specific type of stress pattern in the concrete, taking advantage of the structural weakness where the newer wall section met the original foundation. The charges had to be positioned with mathematical precision. Even a few inches of deviation could result in an unpredictable blast pattern that might fail to create the breach she needed. 2 minutes to diversionary sequence, Rodriguez's voice whispered through her earpiece, confirming that the timing remained on schedule. Maya continued her work, her fingers moving with the steady precision of someone who had practiced these motions hundreds of times during training exercises. The shaped charges were connected by a web of detonation cord that would ensure simultaneous activation across all explosive devices. Maya had calculated the timing sequence to create a cascading failure in the wall's structural integrity, with each charge contributing to a controlled collapse that would fold the wall section inward rather than exploding outward in a pattern that would alert the entire compound to her presence. 1 minute to diversionary sequence, Rodriguez reported. Maya completed the final connections and began her withdrawal to a safe distance from the blast zone. She had identified a depression in the ground approximately 30 meters from the wall that would provide protection from debris while allowing her to observe the results of her explosive work. The guard rotation was proceeding exactly as intelligence had predicted, with the eastern wall guards beginning their movement toward their relief positions. Maya could see the subtle shift in surveillance coverage that would create her 90-second window of reduced observation. Everything was falling into place according to her carefully orchestrated plan. Diversionary sequence initiated, Rodriguez announced, and immediately the western side of the compound erupted in a series of small explosions that lit up the night sky with bright flashes and loud detonations. Maya could hear shouting from the guard towers as the security forces responded to what they believed was the beginning of a coordinated assault on their position. The distraction was working perfectly. Through her night vision equipment, Maya can see guards running toward the western perimeter, their attention completely focused on the apparent threat from that direction. The eastern wall was now minimally defended, with only automated surveillance systems providing security coverage. 30 seconds to wall breach, Maya whispered into her radio, beginning the final countdown to the moment that would determine whether her innovative approach would succeed or fail catastrophically. Her finger hovered over the detonation trigger, waiting for the precise moment when the guard rotation would create optimal conditions for her infiltration. Breach initiated, Maya announced, pressing the trigger that activated her carefully placed explosive charges. The shaped charges detonated in perfect sequence, creating a controlled implosion that caused the targeted section of wall to collapse inward exactly as she had calculated. The sound of the explosion was masked by the ongoing diversionary blasts on the western side of the compound, making it appear to be part of the same coordinated attack. Where solid concrete had stood moments before, there was now a ragged opening large enough for a person to pass through. The breach was neither neat nor elegant, but it was functional and had been achieved without alerting the compound's defenders to her true location. Maya felt a surge of satisfaction as she saw the confirmation that her theoretical calculations had translated into practical success. Without hesitation, Maya sprinted toward the newly created opening in the wall. She had perhaps 60 seconds before the diversionary explosions ended and the guards began returning to their normal surveillance patterns. The breach had been achieved, but the most dangerous part of the mission was just beginning. Maya slipped through the opening in the wall and found herself inside the compound's perimeter for the first time. The layout was exactly as the intelligence reports had indicated, with the main building located approximately 50 meters from her entry point. Security lighting created patches of illumination that she would need to avoid while making her way to the target structure. The compound's interior was a maze of smaller buildings, storage areas, and defensive positions that provided both concealment and potential hazards for an infiltrating soldier. Maya moved with extreme caution, using the shadows and her knowledge of the facility's layout to navigate toward the main building where intelligence suggested the high-value target conducted his evening communications. Breach successful inside compound perimeter, Maya reported quietly to her teammates. Proceeding to primary objective, no indication of detection at this time. The diversionary explosions had ceased, and Maya could hear the sounds of the security forces beginning to reorganize after responding to what they believed had been an attack on the western perimeter. Their voices carried across the compound, indicating confusion about the source and nature of the explosions they had witnessed. Maya reached the base of the main building and began searching for the optimal entry point. The structure was 3 stories tall, with the target's communication room located on the second floor according to thermal imaging analysis. She needed to find a way to reach that floor without using the main entrances, which would certainly be monitored by security systems. Her EOD training had taught her to read buildings like mechanical devices, understanding how their systems and structures could be exploited to gain access to specific areas. The main building had external utility connections that suggested possible entry routes through maintenance areas or service corridors that might not be covered by the primary security systems.
Maya discovered a maintenance access panel on the eastern side of the main building, positioned near what appeared to be electrical and communication utility connections. The panel was secured with a standard military lock that she had encountered numerous times during her EOD training. Her lockpicking skills, developed through years of dealing with explosive devices that required access to secured containers, made quick work of the mechanism. The maintenance corridor behind the access panel was narrow and filled with pipes, electrical conduits, and communication cables that confirmed she had found a route into the building's infrastructure. Maya squeezed into the confined space, using her small stature to her advantage as she navigated through the mechanical systems toward the interior of the structure. The corridor led to a utility room on the ground floor that housed electrical panels, water systems, and communication equipment. Maya paused to orient herself within the building, comparing the layout she was observing with the floor plans that intelligence had provided.
The thermal imaging data had indicated that the target's communication activities occurred on the second floor, which meant she needed to find a way to reach that level without using the main stairways. Through the thin walls of the utility room, Maya could hear voices speaking in what she recognized as Arabic, though she couldn't understand the specific words being spoken. The tone suggested routine conversation rather than alarm or concern, indicating that her infiltration had not yet been detected by the building's occupants. Maya located a service ladder that provided access to the upper floors for maintenance purposes. The ladder was positioned within a vertical shaft that contained the building's main electrical and communication lines, offering a concealed route to the second floor where her target was located. She began climbing carefully, mindful that any noise could alert the building's occupants to her presence. The second-floor access point opened into another utility area that was directly adjacent to the room where thermal imaging had shown consistent evening activity. Maya could hear the distinctive sounds of electronic equipment operating, the hum of radio transmitters, the beeping of digital devices, and the static of communication systems that confirmed she had located the target's operation center. Target area located, Maya whispered into her radio microphone. Electronic signatures match intelligence predictions, preparing to gather required information. Through a ventilation grate, Maya could see into the communication room where a man matching the physical description of their high-value target was seated at a desk surrounded by radio equipment, computers, and maps. He appeared to be conducting the evening communication session that intelligence had predicted, speaking into a microphone connected to what looked like a sophisticated radio transmitter. Maya activated her recording equipment, designed to capture both audio communications and photographic evidence of the target's activities. The intelligence value of this information would be significant, providing confirmation of the target's identity and potentially revealing details about planned attacks against coalition forces that could help coalition forces disrupt enemy operations. The target was speaking in Arabic, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to giving orders and coordinating complex operations. While Maya couldn't understand the specific content of his communications, the recording equipment would capture everything for later analysis by intelligence specialists who could translate and interpret the strategic significance of what was being discussed. As Maya continued her surveillance, she noticed documents spread across the target's desk that appeared to be maps, operational plans, and communication schedules. These physical materials could provide even more valuable intelligence than the recorded conversations, offering insights into planned attacks, supply routes, and organizational structure that could help coalition forces disrupt enemy operations. Maya faced a critical decision. She could complete her mission with the audio recordings and photographic evidence she had already gathered, or she could attempt to gain physical access to the documents on the target's desk. The original mission parameters called for intelligence gathering, but didn't specify whether physical document acquisition was required or merely preferred. The risk calculation was complex. Attempting to enter the communication room would expose her to significantly higher chances of detection and confrontation. However, the potential intelligence value of the physical documents could be enormous, possibly providing information that could save hundreds of coalition lives by preventing planned attacks. Maya decided to attempt document acquisition. Her EOD training had taught her that the most valuable information was often found in the details that people didn't think to protect adequately. If the target felt secure in his communication room, he might have left sensitive materials more accessible than they would be in a more obvious security setting. The ventilation system provided a potential access route into the communication room, though it would require Maya to navigate through confined spaces while remaining absolutely silent. She began the careful process of removing the ventilation grate, using specialized tools to avoid creating any noise that might alert the target to her presence. As Maya prepared to enter the communication room, she could hear the target's conversation becoming more animated, suggesting that he was discussing something of significant importance. The timing was both fortunate and challenging. His focus on the communication session might prevent him from noticing her intrusion, but the increased activity in the room also meant higher risk if something went wrong. Entering target area, Maya whispered into her radio microphone, knowing that this action represented the point of no return for the mission. Once she entered that room, she would be committed to a course of action that would either result in spectacular success or potentially catastrophic failure. Maya lowered herself through the ventilation opening into the communication room, her heart pounding with the intensity of the moment while her training kept her movements controlled and precise.
Maya found herself suspended above the communication room, looking down at the high-value target who continued his animated conversation, completely unaware that a coalition operative was positioned directly above him. The room was larger than it had appeared through the ventilation grate, with multiple workstations containing sophisticated communication equipment, computers displaying tactical information, and walls covered with maps marked with symbols that clearly indicated planned operations. The target was a man in his mid-40s with a thick beard and the weathered appearance of someone who had spent years operating in harsh mountain conditions. He wore traditional Afghan clothing but carried himself with the bearing of a military commander. His gestures and voice convey authority and strategic thinking that confirmed his importance as a high-value target. Maya carefully lowered herself into the room, using a technique she had perfected during EOD operations that required her to access confined spaces without disturbing the surrounding environment. Her movements were controlled by precise muscle control and an understanding of how to distribute her weight to avoid creating noise or vibration that might alert the target to her presence. The documents spread across the target's desk were even more significant than Maya had hoped. She could see detailed maps showing coalition supply routes, timing charts that appeared to coordinate multiple simultaneous attacks, and communication frequencies that suggested a sophisticated network of operatives throughout the region. This intelligence could potentially prevent a coordinated assault that might kill or wound hundreds of coalition personnel. Maya activated her digital camera and began photographing the documents, using specialized equipment that could capture high-resolution images even in low-light conditions. Each photograph was automatically encrypted and stored in multiple memory devices to ensure that the intelligence would survive even if she was captured or killed during the extraction phase of the mission. The target's radio conversation provided additional context for the written materials, and Maya's recording equipment captured every word, even though she couldn't understand the Arabic being spoken. Intelligence analysts would be able to correlate the audio recordings with the photographed documents to create a comprehensive picture of enemy plans and capabilities. As Maya continued her documentation work, she noticed a computer terminal that was actively displaying what appeared to be real-time operational data. The screen showed locations, timing information, and personnel assignments that suggested an attack was scheduled to occur within the next 48 hours. This information was too important to ignore, but accessing the computer would require her to move closer to the target and risk detection. Maya made the decision to attempt computer access, understanding that the intelligence value justified the increased risk. She moved with extraordinary care, using the shadows and furniture placement to remain concealed while positioning herself within reach of the computer terminal. The target stood up suddenly, causing Maya's heart to skip a beat as she froze in position behind a filing cabinet. He walked to a map on the wall and began pointing to specific locations while continuing his radio conversation, his back turned to Maya's position. This movement actually provided Maya with better access to the computer terminal, and she seized the opportunity to download files from the active system. Maya inserted a specialized data storage device into the computer's USB port and activated software designed to rapidly copy files and system information without leaving traces of the intrusion. The download process would take approximately 3 minutes to complete, during which time she would be extremely vulnerable if the target returned to his desk and potentially discovered her presence in the room. The target's conversation seemed to be reaching a conclusion, with his voice taking on the tone of someone providing final instructions or confirmation of plans. Maya realized that she had perhaps 1 minute remaining before he would likely return to the computer and potentially discover her presence in the room. The download completed with 30 seconds to spare, and Maya quickly removed the storage device and retreated to her concealed position. The target concluded his radio conversation and returned to his desk, but his attention was focused on organizing papers rather than checking his computer systems. "Intelligence gathering complete," Maya whispered into her radio microphone.
preparing for extraction, high-value target confirmed, and significant operational intelligence acquired. Maya had accomplished far more than the original mission parameters had specified. She had confirmed the target's identity, recorded his communications, photographed operational documents, and downloaded computer files that could provide unprecedented insight into enemy plans and capabilities. The challenge now was to extract from the compound with this intelligence intact. The extraction plan required her to retrace her route through the building's utility systems and exit through the breach she had created in the compound's perimeter wall. However, the security situation had likely changed during the time she had spent inside the building, and she would need to adapt her approach based on current conditions rather than relying on the original plan. Maya began her careful withdrawal from the communication room, moving through the ventilation system with the same precision she had used during infiltration. The target remained focused on his work, unaware that intelligence crucial to coalition security was being extracted from directly under his nose. As Maya reached the utility corridor that would take her back to the ground floor, she could hear increased activity throughout the building. Voices were speaking more urgently, and there were sounds of movement that suggested the building's security posture had been elevated, possibly in response to the earlier diversionary explosions. Extraction phase initiated, Maya reported to her teammates. Building security appears heightened, but no indication of direct detection. Proceeding to exit route.
Maya reached the ground floor utility room and immediately sensed that the security situation had deteriorated significantly during her time inside the building. Through the thin walls, she could hear multiple voices speaking in urgent tones, suggesting that the compound's defenders had begun to suspect that the earlier explosions might have been more than a random attack. The original extraction plan called for her to exit through the same breach she had created in the eastern wall, but Maya's tactical instincts warned her that this route might now be compromised. Security forces would likely be conducting systematic searches of the compound perimeter, and the wall breach that had been her salvation during infiltration could become a fatal trap during extraction. Rodriguez, Morrison, what's your assessment of compound security status? Maya whispered into her radio microphone, hoping that her teammate's external observation position would provide insight into the changing tactical situation. Rodriguez's response was immediate and concerning. Security activity has increased significantly. We're observing roving patrols and systematic searches of the perimeter. Your original exit route appears to be under direct observation by at least 2 security teams. Maya felt a surge of adrenaline as she realized that her extraction had just become exponentially more dangerous. The success of her intelligence-gathering mission would be meaningless if she couldn't survive to deliver the information she had acquired. She needed to quickly develop an alternative extraction plan using resources and opportunities that hadn't been part of the original operation. Morrison's voice crackled through the radio with additional tactical information. We're intercepting radio communications indicating that compound security believes they may have been infiltrated. They're implementing lockdown procedures and bringing additional personnel from external positions. Maya's mind raced through the alternatives available to her. The building's utility systems that had provided her infiltration route could potentially be used for extraction, but they would only take her to different points within the compound rather than providing a way to escape the perimeter entirely. She needed to find a route that would bypass the enhanced security measures while taking advantage of resources that the defenders wouldn't expect her to exploit. Her EOD training had taught her to think creatively about infrastructure and facilities, understanding that buildings and facilities often contained multiple interconnected networks that served different purposes. Maya remembered noticing drainage systems during her initial reconnaissance, systems that might connect the compound to external areas without passing through the primary security perimeter. Maya began searching the utility room for access points to the compound's drainage infrastructure. These systems were typically designed for water management rather than security, which meant they might not be covered by the same surveillance and defensive measures that protected the more obvious entry and exit points. She discovered a drainage access point behind the building's main electrical panel, secured with a cover that could be removed without specialized tools. The opening led to a concrete tunnel that appeared to extend beyond the building's foundation, potentially providing a route that would bypass the compound's primary security perimeter entirely. Alternative extraction route identified, Maya reported to her teammates. Drainage system access may provide exit opportunity that avoids enhanced security measures, preparing to attempt drainage extraction. The drainage tunnel was cramped and partially filled with standing water, but it was large enough for Maya to crawl through while carrying her equipment and the intelligence materials she had acquired. The tunnel extended in a direction that would take her away from the compound's main facilities and toward the natural terrain features that had provided concealment during their initial approach. Maya began her crawl through the drainage system, moving as quickly as possible while trying to minimize the noise created by her movement through the standing water. The tunnel was completely dark, requiring her to navigate by feel and her understanding of the compound's layout, rather than relying on visual references. The confined space triggered memories of her EOD training, where she had learned to work in cramped conditions while dealing with explosive devices that could detonate if disturbed incorrectly. Those experiences had taught her to control claustrophobic responses and maintain focus even when operating in uncomfortable and potentially dangerous environments. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 minutes, Maya saw light ahead of her that indicated the tunnel's exit point. She approached the opening carefully, knowing that emerging from the drainage system would make her vulnerable if security forces had expanded their search perimeter to include the natural terrain around the compound. Maya reached the tunnel exit and cautiously observed the area beyond. The drainage system emerged in a rocky depression approximately 200 meters from the compound's eastern wall, in an area that appeared to be outside the current search pattern being conducted by the security forces. The position offered natural concealment and a potential route back to the extraction point where Rodriguez and Morrison were waiting. Alternative extraction route successful, Maya whispered into her radio. I'm approximately 200 meters northeast of compound in rocky terrain that provides concealment, proceeding to rendezvous point. Maya emerged from the drainage tunnel and immediately took cover behind natural rock formations that would hide her from observation by compound security forces. She could see searchlights sweeping across other areas of the terrain, confirming that the security response had expanded beyond the compound's immediate perimeter. The intelligence materials she had acquired during her infiltration were secure and undamaged despite her unconventional extraction route. The photographs, audio recordings, and computer files that documented enemy plans and capabilities had survived the challenging conditions she had encountered, ensuring that her mission objectives had been accomplished successfully. Maya began her movement toward the rendezvous point where Rodriguez and Morrison were positioned, using the natural terrain features to remain concealed while making steady progress away from the compound. Behind her, she could see the continued security activity as the defenders searched for an infiltrator they suspected but couldn't locate.
Maya reached the rendezvous point 43 minutes after beginning her extraction from the compound, finding Rodriguez and Morrison in their concealed observation position with relief evident on their faces. The reunion was brief but emotional, as all three team members understood how close the mission had come to potential disaster when the security situation had deteriorated during the extraction phase. Outstanding work, Chen, Rodriguez said quietly, his voice carrying genuine admiration for the tactical innovation and personal courage Maya had demonstrated throughout the operation. I've never seen anyone adapt to changing conditions with that level of creativity and effectiveness. Morrison was already preparing to transmit their mission success report to Commander Harrison and the command post. The intelligence materials you acquired are going to have significant strategic value. Intelligence analysts will be able to use this information to prevent planned attacks and disrupt enemy operations throughout the region. Maya felt a profound sense of accomplishment as she reflected on what they had achieved. The mission that Commander Harrison had initially considered too dangerous for a solo operation had been completed successfully through innovative tactics, precise execution, and the ability to adapt when circumstances changed unexpectedly. Command post, this is infiltration team, Morrison reported through their encrypted communication system. Mission accomplished. High-value target confirmed. Significant intelligence materials acquired and all team members accounted for. Ready for extraction. Commander Harrison's response came back immediately, his voice carrying both relief and professional satisfaction. Outstanding work, infiltration team. Your success will have strategic implications beyond the immediate tactical objectives. Extraction helicopter is en route to your position and will arrive in approximately 15 minutes. As they waited for their extraction, Maya took a moment to process the significance of what had occurred. Her unconventional approach to the infiltration problem had not only succeeded, but had exceeded the original mission parameters by acquiring intelligence that could potentially save hundreds of coalition lives. More importantly, it had demonstrated that innovative thinking and technical expertise could overcome seemingly impossible tactical challenges. Rodriguez began preparing their equipment for helicopter extraction, ensuring that all sensitive materials were properly secured for transport. Chen, I want you to know that this operation is going to change how people think about infiltration tactics. What you accomplished tonight is going to be studied and adapted for future operations. The sound of helicopter rotors became audible in the distance, growing louder as their extraction aircraft approached the designated pickup point. Maya felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration as she realized that they had successfully completed one of the most challenging missions of her military career. The UH-60 Black Hawk appeared over the rocky terrain, its navigation lights barely visible as the flight crew executed a tactical approach designed to minimize exposure to potential enemy fire. The helicopter settled into the extraction point with the same precision that had characterized their insertion, and Maya and her teammates quickly boarded the aircraft. As the helicopter lifted off and began its flight back to their base, Maya looked down at the compound that had been the focus of so much planning and preparation. The facility's lights were still visible in the distance, but the intelligence she carried would soon render many of its operations ineffective, as coalition forces used the acquired information to disrupt enemy plans and capabilities. Commander Harrison was waiting for them when the helicopter landed at their base. His presence indicated the importance he placed on debriefing the mission while details were still fresh in everyone's memory. Maya could see both professional satisfaction and personal relief in his expression as he greeted the returning team. "Sergeant Chen," Harrison said as they walked toward the debriefing facility, "your tactical innovation and operational execution have exceeded every expectation. The intelligence you acquired is already being analyzed by regional command, and preliminary assessments suggest it will provide actionable information for preventing planned attacks against coalition forces." The debriefing session lasted for several hours, with Maya providing detailed accounts of her infiltration techniques, the intelligence materials she had acquired, and the adaptive extraction methods she had used when the original plan became compromised. Intelligence specialists documented every aspect of her observations, ensuring that the strategic value of the mission would be fully realized. As the debriefing concluded and Maya finally had a moment to reflect on the events of the past 24 hours, she realized that the mission had accomplished more than just intelligence gathering. It had proven that unconventional approaches could succeed where traditional methods had failed, and it had established her reputation as a tactical innovator capable of solving complex operational problems. Commander Harrison approached Maya as she prepared to leave the debriefing facility. "Sergeant Chen, I want you to know that your performance on this mission has been exceptional. You've demonstrated exactly the kind of tactical thinking and operational courage that we need to address the evolving challenges we face in this theater of operations." Maya felt a deep sense of professional satisfaction as she realized that her willingness to challenge conventional approaches and develop innovative solutions had not only succeeded tactically, but had earned the respect and recognition of her commanding officers and teammates. The dismissive skepticism she had encountered when first proposing her infiltration plan had been replaced by professional admiration and acknowledgement of her capabilities.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.